When we hear God of War, we think of honor, of bravery, of righteous battles fought for noble causes. But what if I told you the Greek god of war was none of those things? He wasn't a hero. He wasn't beloved. In fact, he wasn't even respected. Ares, son of Zeus and Hera, was feared, but never admired. He represented not the glory of war, but its chaos, its bloodlust, its uncontrollable rage. And maybe that's why the gods kept him at arm's length, and why we still do. But here's the thing, even the gods we fear have stories worth hearing, because Ares isn't just the god of battlefields. He's the god of the storm inside us, the rage we suppress, the violence we fear, the chaos we sometimes become. And to understand him is to better understand ourselves. In the next 30 minutes, we'll walk through the myths that made Ares an outcast among gods, the tragic romance with Aphrodite, the legacy of warrior women born from his blood, and why the Romans embraced Mars while the Greeks pushed Ares away. This isn't just a story of war. It's a story of identity, of control, of what happens when power loses its purpose. So if you've ever felt misunderstood, if you've ever battled yourself more than your enemies, if you've ever feared what you might become when anger takes over, then stay with us, because the god of war has more to say than you've ever been told. Not all gods were born into glory. Some entered Olympus like guests at the wrong party. Unwanted, uncelebrated. Ares was one of them. He was the son of Zeus and Hera, two of the most powerful gods in Greek mythology. But even they didn't like him. In the Iliad, Zeus says,
"To me, you are the most hateful of all the gods who dwell on Olympus."
Imagine hearing that from your own father. From the very beginning, Ares was marked, not as a hero, not as a protector, but as a problem. He wasn't the god of strategic warfare. That was Athena. He wasn't the god of order, justice, or kingship. That was Zeus. Ares was chaos, raw, emotional, unpredictable. The kind of force that doesn't fit in palaces, but rages on battlefields. And so, he was pushed aside. While Athena had temples in every major city, Ares was worshipped on the outskirts, in Thrace, Scythia, and with tribes that civilized Greeks called barbaric, not because he was weak, but because he was wild. To the Greeks, Ares wasn't someone you aspire to be. He was someone you had to deal with, like a storm, like an untamed fire. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Ares was never meant to be the polished god with perfect lines and golden light. Maybe he was meant to be the shadow that reminds us. Not all power is beautiful, and not all rejection is weakness. We've all felt it, that sting of being the odd one out, the one who doesn't fit. And like Ares, we learn, sometimes being left out isn't about who we are, it's about what others can't handle. But Ares didn't disappear. He didn't change to be liked. He didn't shrink. He fought, and though he didn't always win, he left a mark no one could ignore. So what happens when someone born to be hated dares to fight anyway? Let's find out what happened when Ares brought his fist to the battlefield, and why more often than not, he still lost. Ares was strong, unquestionably strong. He was the god of raw force, the embodiment of battle lust. But here's the truth few tell. Ares wasn't a good warrior. He had power, yes, but not discipline. He had speed, but not strategy. And in myth after myth, his rage led him to defeat his greatest rival, his own sister, Athena. Where Ares charged in headfirst, Athena studied the terrain. Where Ares swung wildly, Athena waited and struck once with precision. You know, that friend who always acts on impulse, says something they regret, spends what they don't have, rushes into fights they don't understand. That's Ares, and we've all been there. At some point, raw power feels satisfying in the moment, but it rarely wins the war. In one myth, Ares was so outmatched by two giants. He got trapped inside a bronze jar for over a year. He screamed, rage pounded, but no one came, because the gods knew power without wisdom is dangerous to everyone, even to itself. In life, the loudest person in the room isn't always the strongest. The most aggressive isn't always the most effective. Sometimes real strength is the pause before the punch. Ares teaches us a hard truth. Being strong isn't enough. You have to be smart about where you place that strength and why you're using it in the first place. But even in defeat, Ares never disappeared. He found followers, in those who felt rage burn hotter than reason, in warriors who didn't need a reason to fight, only an excuse. And those followers were not always noble. Let's take a walk to the edge of civilization, to the temples built not in cities, but in shadows, and meet the ones who worshipped war for war's sake. Not every god is worshipped in golden temples. Some are honored in the shadows, with blood, with steel, and with silence. Ares was that kind of god. While Zeus ruled from marble thrones, and Athena guided cities with logic and law, Ares found his followers elsewhere, among the scattered tribes, the outcast warriors, the ones who lived by one rule, survived in Thrace and Scythia. Ares wasn't feared, he was respected. He was believed to be born there, among the harsh winds, the horse lords, and the warrior clans. These weren't people who built cities. They built reputations in blood. And to them, Ares wasn't a god of war. He was the god of survival. According to ancient sources like Aeschylus and Apuleius, even bandits and murderers sacrificed to Ares, not for justice, not for glory, but for permission to spill blood and walk away with no guilt. It's a dark thought, isn't it? A god who doesn't ask for reason, only loyalty. And yet, that made Ares accessible in a way other gods weren't. You didn't have to be noble. You didn't need wealth. You didn't even need to be good. You just had to be willing to fight. At Sparta, the most warlike city in Greece, they built a statue of Ares in chains. Why? To bind his violence to their cause. To remind themselves, even war must serve something greater than itself. There's a lesson there, especially for us today. Yes, we all have anger. We all carry fire. But what we do with it, how we direct it, is what defines us. Ares without chains is destruction, but Ares harnessed can be strength. So the question isn't whether you carry Ares inside you. You do. We all do. The question is, who's holding the chains? And speaking of chains, let's look at the ones he passed down to the sons and daughters who carried both his fire and his contradictions. Next, we step into the tangled family tree of Ares, where fear, love, victory, and harmony all call him father. Ares, god of war, blood, and chaos, may not have been a beloved son, but he was a father, and the children he left behind, they were just as complex as he was. Some were exactly what you'd expect. He fathered Phobos, the god of panic, and Deimos, the god of fear. They didn't walk into battle behind their father. They rode beside him, spreading terror ahead like a storm. To face Ares on the field was one thing, but to face your own fear and panic before he arrived, that's how he truly won. But not all his children were born of fear. Some were surprisingly gentle. There was Harmonia, goddess of harmony. There was Eros, the god of love and desire. And in some myths, even Nike, the winged goddess of victory, called Ares father. Strange, right? The god of rage and ruin, fathering love, peace, and triumph. But maybe that's exactly the point. Ares wasn't just destruction. He was duality. From his blood came both terror and tenderness, both chaos and clarity. Because even in war, there is love. Even in pain, there is peace waiting to return. We all carry a little of this contradiction. We get angry, yet we still care. We shout, then we regret. We fight because we want to protect. Ares reminds us that being messy doesn't mean being meaningless. That even in our darkest parts, there are seeds of strength, love, and yes, victory. But if Ares taught his children anything, it was this: to feel is not weakness. To love is not surrender. And even those born in war can choose a different path. And perhaps no story shows that better than his love affair with the goddess of love herself, Aphrodite, a bond made of fire and beauty, lust and heartbreak. a love so intense, it could only end in war. Let's step into that passion and explore how love nearly softened the god of war. It's a love story no one expected, and everyone remembers. Ares, the god of war. Aphrodite, the goddess of love. What happens when fire meets silk? When rage falls in love with beauty? Their love wasn't pure. It wasn't gentle. It was passionate, forbidden, and doomed, because Aphrodite was married to Hephaestus, god of fire, of craft, of patience. The exact opposite of Ares. The story goes that Hephaestus, knowing of the affair, crafted a golden net, so thin it was invisible, so strong it was unbreakable. He caught them in the act and dragged them before the gods. Humiliation, judgment, laughter echoing across Olympus. But what the stories rarely say is how real that love might have been, because even after the shame, even after Aphrodite returned to her husband, she and Ares couldn't stay away. Together, they had children: Eros, Phobos, Harmonia, and more. Love born from war, harmony born from chaos. We've all seen it. That couple that burns too hot. They fight, they make up, they break again. Some call it toxic, some call it fate, and maybe it's a little of both. Because when two powerful forces collide, the result isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just more power, but love isn't always what saves us. Sometimes it's what breaks us open. Ares, jealous of Adonis, sent a wild boar to kill him, and Aphrodite, cradling the lifeless body of the man she adored, wept in a way even gods could not comfort. That's what happens when love and destruction dance too close. Someone always bleeds. From Ares and Aphrodite, we learn this. Not all love is meant to last. Some love stories exist not to teach us about forever, but to teach us about depth, about desire, and about the cost of letting passion rule reason. And yet, even in heartbreak, Ares' legacy didn't end. From another love, one just as wild, came a tribe of warriors that shook the world. Fierce, free, female, the daughters of Ares, the Amazons. Let's meet them next. If Ares was the god of untamed strength, then the Amazons were its most stunning expression. They were fierce, they were free, and they were his daughters. According to myth, the first Amazon, Atra, was born of Ares and a woodland nymph. Some say she became his lover. Some say she defied him. But either way, she founded a legacy, one of queens, warriors, and independence. Ares fathered Amazonian queens like Hippolyta, who wore a magic belt gifted by him, and Penthesilea, who fought Achilles to her final breath. These women weren't side characters. They were forces of their own. They stood toe-to-toe with men, gods, and fate itself, in a world where women were often silent in stories. The Amazons spoke with sword and fire, and it's no accident that they were born of Ares, because while he was chaos and conflict, they became order in motion. They didn't fight for rage. They fought for freedom. The spirit of the Amazons lives on in every woman who dares to take space, to lead, to protect. They remind us, you don't need permission to be powerful. You don't need anyone's approval to stand tall. And maybe, just maybe, you don't even need to explain yourself. But even warriors fall. Even queens meet their fate. Hippolyta was tricked and killed. Penthesilea died in the arms of her enemy, Achilles, who, in her final moment, saw the soul of a warrior he could finally respect. From Ares came fire, but through the Amazons, that fire became something beautiful, a flame that lights not destruction, but legacy. And yet for all his children, all his lovers, all his chaos, Ares himself remained restless, still feared, still outcast, still misunderstood. So what did the Romans do? They reimagined it. They gave him a new name, a new purpose, a new reputation. Let's meet Mars, the Roman version of Ares, and everything the Greeks said he could never be. Sometimes a name changes everything. To the Greeks, he was Ares, the god of rage, bloodlust, and war without reason. To the Romans, he became Mars, the father of Rome, a protector, a hero. Same god, different story. In Greek mythology, Ares was often humiliated, mocked, or simply ignored. He fought for the thrill, not for the cause. He was unpredictable, unwelcome, and, at times, unforgivable. But the Romans looked at that same god and saw something else. They reimagined him as Mars. Not just a warrior, but a father figure. Mars wasn't the shame of Olympus. He was the pillar of Roman identity. Mars was believed to be the father of Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. He wasn't a god you feared in isolation. He was a god you prayed to before battle, and after peace was secured. It's funny, isn't it? How two civilizations can look at the same divine force and write two completely different endings. To the Greeks, war was something to survive. To the Romans, war was something to master. Ares burned cities. Mars built empires. And maybe that says less about the gods and more about the people who told their stories. We all carry both within us. Ares, the impulse. Mars, the discipline, the fire, and the foundation. And maybe the challenge of being human is learning when to let one lead the other. So next time you feel the fight rising in you, ask yourself, am I fighting like Ares or standing like Mars? One burns bridges, the other builds nations. And while the myths have faded, the memory of both gods still hangs above us. Literally, Mars, the red planet, named not for who Ares was, but for who he could have been. And circling him, his sons Phobos and Deimos, fear and panic, forever orbiting, just like they did on ancient battlefields. But long before Mars ruled the sky, and long after the Romans wrote his name in stone, Ares stood trial for something far darker. Not a war, not a betrayal, but a murder. And from that moment came the foundations of law itself. Let's step into the shadows and enter the court of the gods. Even the gods stood trial. And once, just once, so did Ares. The story is old, and like many myths, its details shift with the telling. But its heart is this. Ares was accused of murder, not just in war, but in cold blood. The victim? Areopagus, a son of Poseidon. Some say he tried to violate Ares' daughter, Alcippe. Others say it was a fight between prideful gods. But what came next was extraordinary. The gods didn't retaliate. They judged, and they did so at a place that would become sacred, the Areopagus. This wasn't just mythology. This was the origin of law. The Greeks believed justice shouldn't be decided by strength, but by reason. Even Ares, bringer of violence, deserved a trial. And at the Areopagus, he was acquitted. Think about that. The god of war, accused of murder, and still granted a fair hearing. Because justice, at its best, is not about who you are, but about what is right. Today, we still try to live by that ideal. That no one, no matter how powerful or feared, is above the law, and no one, no matter how broken, is beneath it. Ares reminds us that even in a world built on battle, there must be room for fairness. That even those who cause harm must face truth, and that sometimes facing what we've done is braver than swinging any sword. But if Ares had a courtroom, he also had a mirror, a moment to look at himself and ask, what kind of god have I become? Maybe that's why he still orbits us. Why Mars, the Roman Ares, hangs above our heads. Not as a warning, but as a reminder that rage, violence, fear, they don't disappear. They circle until we face them and name them. So let's turn our eyes to the stars, to a red planet, two restless moons, and a hymn so ancient, even the skies still echo its fire. Let's finish this journey where mythology meets the cosmos. We often think of Ares as a god out there, on battlefields and myths, swinging swords and stirring chaos. But what if I told you, Ares lives in here, beneath the skin, in the places we don't always want to look? To the Greeks, Ares wasn't just the god of war. He was the god of rage, of the blind instinct to lash out, to destroy before thinking, to strike first, regret later. Plato once wrote, "Those who follow Ares are so maddened by death, they will kill anyone, even those they love." We all carry a piece of Ares. In the moments we lose control, in the seconds we snap, in the rage we bottle up until it explodes. He is the shadow, as Carl Jung would call it, the part of us we try to suppress. But the more we hide it, the louder it knocks. Ares doesn't ask us to destroy. He asks us to understand, to notice. Where is this anger coming from? What am I really fighting? Sometimes the battle isn't with the world. It's with the voice inside that says, "You're not enough." And once we hear that voice, we can begin to answer it, not with fists, but with compassion. Because anger, when left unchecked, is wildfire. But anger, when understood, can become fuel. Fuel for change, for boundaries, for healing. Ares isn't here to be feared. He's here to be faced, to teach us that rage has a name, that wounds can roar, and that even the most violent parts of us are asking to be heard. So maybe you don't need to banish your anger. Maybe you just need to give a place, a seat at the table, and ask it gently, what are you trying to protect? Even in the stars, Ares still circles us. Mars glows red in the sky, not as a warning, but as a mirror, a reminder of what we hold and what we can become if we choose to meet ourselves with truth. So as we reach the end of this journey, let's look at the legacy Ares leaves behind, not as a monster, but as a reflection, a symbol not of endless battle, but of the power to turn inward and rise wiser than before. Let's close our circle with the truth that ties it all together. Long after the last temples crumbled, long after the last warriors laid down their swords, Ares never truly left us. He just moved higher, into the stars. Today we call him Mars, the red planet, the god of war, watching over us from above. And he's not alone. Circling him are two tiny moons, Phobos, fear, Deimos, panic, the same forces that once rode beside him into battle, now orbit forever in silence. It's fitting, isn't it, that in the vast quiet of space, the god of rage is still accompanied by the children of fear, because fear and anger are timeless. They don't belong to an ancient age. They live with us. They move through us. Maybe we don't defeat our inner wars. Maybe we learn to live with them, to circle them, to understand them, to know that strength isn't about never feeling fear or rage. It's about what we choose to do when they rise. The myths of Ares weren't just written to scare us. They were written to prepare us, to remind us that the fiercest battles we'll ever fight aren't out there. They're inside, and that's where real heroism begins. Not in conquest, but in consciousness. Not in crushing enemies, but in calming the storms within. So when you look up at Mars tonight, remember, the gods may seem far away, but their stories are still written in us. And maybe, just maybe, our battles too can become legends worth telling if stories like this light a fire in you. If you believe myths still have something to teach us about courage, fear, and hope, then join our circle. Like this video if you feel the echoes of ancient gods still beat in today's world. Comment below which part of Ares' story spoke to you the most. And subscribe to A God Circle to journey deeper into the myths, mysteries, and meanings behind every god and every legend. Because here, every god has a voice, and every voice has a story worth hearing. We'll see you in the next circle.